Salutations, everypup, and welcome to Chapter 18 of The One They Call Broccoli by Texiliaz. And no, I did not skip a chapter. Chapter 17 is an author's note and doesn't really have any of the story. With all that out of the way, the link to the fiction as always, the link to the fic will be in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's jump on into it. Chapter 18. That time Izuku got possessed. Summary. It's the first day back to school after the USJ attack. All Izuku is hoping for is a quiet day back in school. Is that too much to ask for? Author's notes. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for all the lovely support. I seriously appreciate every single one of you so much. The medication is still messing with my head, but it is much better now than it was before. This was supposed to be a longer chapter, but I just couldn't finish the second half and felt, hey, I might as well post this part now. Also, I know this was supposed to be the sports festival, but it felt like we still had some things to go through before that. Sorry. I really missed writing this story, and I hope that you enjoy this chapter. Trigger warnings. Possession? Dissociation? Izuku's point of view. It was the first day back to school after the USJ attack, and Izuku was both excited to be back, but also terrified to see everyone in class again. He really hoped no one knew how weird he had acted during and after the attack last week. After all, it was pretty traumatic, and perfectly normal for someone to act a bit weird considering the circumstances. So, hopefully, people would have enough tact not to bring it up or ask him any questions. Right? Right? Izuku sighed and braced himself, taking one last breath before opening the classroom door. Most of the students had come out of the attack relatively unharmed, aside from the obvious mental trauma, with Izuku having some of the worst physical injuries. So it wasn't a surprise when Izuku found the rest of his classmates attending school with him, apparently being the last one to get there this morning. What was a surprise, though, was how, when he stepped foot in the classroom, Asui immediately approached him. Midoriya, are you okay, Gero? How is Aizawa-sensei? Asui asked him, leaning close into his personal space and tilting her head at the question. Izuku blinked at her and leaned back, smiling nervously. Good morning, Asui. I'm fine, thank you, he answered automatically. But then her second question sunk in and he froze, looking at her in confusion. And, I don't know how Aizawa-sensei is? Why do you ask me that? Asui tilted her head further, her wide eyes staring into his very soul. Gero, well, considering he's your dad, I figured you would know, she stated, like it was an obvious fact. Wait, Aizawa-sensei is Midoriya's father? Uradaka gasped loudly from right next to them. Izuku flinched at her loud volume and was quick to shush her, shaking his head frantically. But it was too late, because about half the class had heard her and were now looking their way. They were all staring at him with mixed levels of curiosity and shocked expressions on their faces. And Izuku just stood there, completely frozen while he wished the ground would open up and swallow him whole. All this attention made his skin crawl. When Izuku finally found his voice, he found himself blurting out a loud and defensive, No, he's not! Most of them just looked unimpressed, though, and Izuku cursed internally. It was... Well, in the heat of the moment, it just slipped out. It was an honest mistake, he stammered, begging his classmates to believe him. It was bad enough that his teachers had heard him call them that. Izuku did not want the whole class to start teasing him about this, or start any weird rumors about him only getting into UA because of his dad. What? Will they think their teacher is playing favorites? What if they start hating me, or Aizawa? Izuku swallowed nervously and looked around the room. Most of his classmates were giving him non-believing looks. Others looked skeptical, but no one seemed mad. They all mostly looked curious. Then there was Kachan, who had gone from glaring at him to looking shocked, to now looking amused? Just to make sure, Izuku glanced back over at Kachan and, yup, the blonde was wearing a shit-eating grin while leaning back in his seat, showing no sign to help Izuku whatsoever. Izuku didn't even know why he had expected anything else. Of course, Kachan would find his misery amusing. It's okay, Uraraka. It's okay, Midoriya, Uraraka said gently, making him whip around to stare at her. We're not judging you or anything. We were just surprised, she reassured him. As soon as she said those words, a few of the others quickly chimed in with their own words of support, telling him it was okay and that he didn't need to hide it from them. Which, okay, that was kind of sweet, but also, not a single one said they believed him. No, seriously, we're not related, Izuku groaned, begging them to just listen to him. And also begging for the Vestiges to please stop freaking laughing at him. They were seriously not helping. I, I have just known him for a long time before UA, so I mean, in that moment when the villain, I was, it just slipped out. Izuku ended weakly, trailing off and turning his gaze to the floor. His eyes were stinging, and he bit his lip, refusing to cry in front of everyone. He silently cursed himself for being so pathetic. He should be over this by now. Shota was fine. They all went through the same thing, and Izuku absolutely hated how weak he felt and how he was tearing up just thinking about that day. The classroom got awfully quiet, a weird tension in the air, and once again, Izuku wanted nothing more than to crawl underground and disappear forever. He nearly jolted out of his skin when he felt a hand land on his shoulder. Izuku turned to find Uraraka smiling at him, a soft and almost understanding look in her eyes. Sorry, Midoriya. I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that, she said gently, giving his shoulder a firm squeeze. I'm sorry too, Gattle, Asui croaked, looking guilty for having brought it up in the first place. Izuku took a deep breath and smiled back at them. It's okay, really, he reassured them, feeling some of the tension leave his shoulders when his classmates dropped the subject and started to go back to their own conversations. He spent the rest of the time before homeroom talking with Asui and Uraraka. Thankfully, none of them mentioned the USJ, and instead, the three of them talked about their weekends, keeping the subjects light-hearted. Izuku, too busy talking with his two classmates, didn't notice a certain dual-haired boy staring at him, a thoughtful look on his face while he wrote something down on a notepad. The bell rang, and they all went to their seats, wondering who their substitute teacher would be until Aizawa-sensei was recovered. After all, the last time he had seen Aizawa, he had been stuck in the hospital, and Broccoli had overheard that they wanted to keep him there for another week, much to the man's annoyance. So imagine their surprise when, instead of a substitute, Aizawa himself stepped through the classroom door. The man was head to toe covered in bandages and looking in no way or form like he should be teaching a class. Izuku frowned at his teacher, annoyed that the man didn't take his injuries seriously. But then, Izuku had to close his eyes, and he hissed silently in pain at the sheer amount of fury that came rushing from the Vestiges. Sure, Izuku was annoyed at Aizawa, and maybe disappointed, but the Vestiges? They were furious. The whole homeroom was spent with Izuku trying to calm down the Vestiges, while doing his best not to flinch at every overwhelming stab of emotion running through him. But to no avail. He couldn't hear most of the things that the past users were saying, their voices overlapping and tangling together, leaving him feeling dizzy and disoriented. But he did catch a few things here and there. They were mostly swearing up a storm, complaining about self-sacrificing idiots, and how they couldn't take this anymore. It was a bit worrying, to be honest. As soon as homeroom ended, the Vestiges all but demanded that Izuku go and speak with Aizawa. Not daring to say no to the 7 dead heroes haunting his mind, Izuku stood up on trembling legs and walked over to his teacher, ignoring his classmates' curious stares. Um, Aizawa-sensei? Could, could we talk? He asked carefully. But before the man even had a chance to answer, Izuku felt his hand reach forward. And before he knew what was happening, his legs moved on their own, dragging his confused teacher by one bandaged arm out the door. They managed to make it to a nearby supply closet before something inside of Izuku thought, good enough, and he pulled Aizawa into the small closet, slamming the door shut behind him. Izuku turned to glare at the teacher. You are not setting a good example to your students right now, he heard himself say sternly, not recognizing his own voice. Aizawa just sighed. Midoriya, I'm fine. Something inside of Izuku seemed to snap at those words. He wasn't sure what was happening, but it was like he was pushed out, and the next time he blinked, he saw himself from the outside of his own body. This in itself wasn't anything new. He'd experienced dissociation before, but this felt different. And something that was certainly different was that his skin and eyes had started glowing. And it seemed like Aizawa had noticed it too, if the sharp intake of breath Izuku heard was anything to go by. The next time Izuku spoke, several other voices melted together, all of them seething with raw and uncontrolled anger. If you can't listen to your own student, then listen to the several heroes who stubbornly died in the line of duty, and who are telling you to rest. The Vestiges all but growled, turning Izuku's face into a snarl. Izuku, the one floating outside of his body, reeled back and his eyes widened in panic as he realized what was going on. When did they learn to do this? What's going on? He thought, floating closer and tried in vain to get the others' attention. But they either couldn't see him or they chose to ignore him. Izuku could feel himself starting to panic even more. This, whatever this is, was really bad. Was this how the Vestiges felt all those years before I could see them? He hated it. He hated this. Why did they push him out? How did they even manage to do it? And how does he change back? The Vestiges were still talking, seemingly going on a rant, and Izuku found himself listening in and doing his best to pay attention. And don't think for a damn second that we have forgotten how you spent years telling Toshi to do the same thing. You goddamn hypocrite! We were right there! And we are honestly getting sick and tired of seeing self-sacrificing fools like the three of you torturing yourselves in this way. They took a step closer to Aizawa, forcing him to take a step back and hitting the back of the closet. With all the bandages, Izuku couldn't see the man's expression, but he would bet that Aizawa was probably looking as shocked and confused as Izuku felt. Now go home, cuddle with Slushy, and for fuck's sake, rest! 'Cause if you don't, then we'll drag you to Nezu and have him force you to take sick leave for the next month. And don't test us. You know as well as we do that Izuku has the rat wrapped around his finger. Wait, I have what? Izuku thought, blinking in confusion. But then, all of a sudden, their control on Izuku slipped, and he came crashing back into himself with a gasp, losing his balance and stumbling right into Aizawa. Izuku groaned. He had a splitting headache and felt exhausted, like all of his energy had been sapped right out of him. He felt someone tap him on the shoulder, and he looked up, meeting Aizawa's shocked eyes. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then, Izuku's eyes widened as he realized what had just happened, and he jumped back with a yelp. That wasn't me, I swear! Izuku squeaked out, backing into the door and putting his hands up in defense. I got that much, Aizawa said slowly, before clearing his throat. So, has that happened before? His teacher asked, shifting his stance and seemingly relaxing a little now that Izuku was back to normal. No, I mean, it's new. They've never done that before, Izuku answered honestly, still a bit shaken up by the whole ordeal. The room was spinning around him, and he felt himself having to lean back against the door just to stay upright. The Vestiges started talking inside his mind, and Izuku found himself ducking his head, blushing furiously while they asked him to pass on a message, since they seemed to be unable to take over again. Maybe a time limit? Or energy consumption? Izuku shook his head, and focused on repeating their words to Aizawa. They say that they didn't know they could do that, but that they got so frustrated over your... Guys, do I really have to? Izuku whined, burying his face in his hands. This was mortifying. There was a pause, and they repeated the message. No, please don't try to take over again. It felt weird. Okay, fine. I'll tell him. Just please don't do that again. Taking a deep breath, Izuku continued speaking, avoiding to look up at his teacher. This is them saying this, and not me, by the way, but they, well, uh, apparently they got so frustrated over your idiocy that they couldn't just stand sitting by and just watching anymore. And they say they're sorry for being so harsh, but a certain other idiot has been getting on their nerves lately, and... Wait a minute, are you talking about me? Izuku shrieked, offended when the Vestiges just laughed at him. He heard Aizawa's chuckle, and he blushed brighter when he realized that his teacher was laughing at him, too. Alright, fine, Aizawa chuckled, shaking his head. They are correct, after all. I need to set a good example for that other idiot, right? He said, amusement clear in his voice. Right, Izuku agreed, feeling embarrassed. Right. I'll go talk to Nezu about taking time off. Izuku smiled, his shoulders dropping in relief. Thank you, Sensei, he whispered. In the meantime, you should probably go and visit Recovery Girl. You look like you will fall over any second. He paused, seemingly considering his next words. Also, I understand the past users might mean well, but taking over like that, especially without warning, could be dangerous for you. So make sure you are all on the same page, and don't get hurt. You got it, problem children? Yes, Sensei? Who are you calling children? We're all older than you, the Vestiges protested loudly, unheard to the man. Later, in the void. Okay, so what the absolute fuck was that? Diagoro demanded, slamming a clenched fist on his armrest and looking between the other Vestiges. Izuku was currently resting in the nurse's office, fast asleep. I have no idea, Yuichi answered tiredly, rubbing his temple. Yoichi wasn't even aware he could get headaches while in the void, but it felt like that was all they had nowadays, ever since they transferred over to Izuku. So, what's the plan? Diagora continued. Just take over Izzy's body, walk up to the two of them, and say, Yo, dumbasses, your child and cat are literally the same person. Also, his mom is hella sus and wouldn't even notice if you kept him, since he has been living with you for years. There was a collective sigh echoing around the void, and Nana shook her head, leaning back in her seat with her arms crossed. Nah, the kid would never forgive us. I don't want to break his trust like that, she said solemnly. Agreed. We need to be smart about this, Hikage said carefully. If we could somehow leave them a note or tell them without Izuku knowing, that would be a great way. That way, we could simply let Izuku believe they figured it out on their own. Maybe while he's asleep? En hummed, leaning back and looking thoughtful. Yeah, but that would mean taking over the kid's body without his knowledge or consent. Doesn't that sound kind of unheroic? Nana pointed out, making some of the others wince. They were all quiet for a moment, looking at each other. Until Diagoro seemed to have had enough, and he stood up to start pacing around the circle of chairs. Ugh! Why are you all gotta make it so difficult? The man growled, while throwing his hands into the air. Who cares if the kid gets a little upset for a while? It's for his own damn good. Can't we just tell them right now? He won't just be a little upset. He'll be devastated, Nana corrected, glaring at him. If he finds out we've gone behind his back, he'll never trust us ever again. And considering we are literally stuck together for all eternity, I'd rather stay on the kid's good side. Not to mention, Yoichi cut in, Izuku isn't exactly the most stable. If we do it too suddenly, or he finds out we went behind his back, then he would feel like we have betrayed him. Exactly. And with all that shit the kid is already dealing with, a betrayal like that might actually literally break him. We can't take that risk. Nana sighed, shaking her head sadly. I agree, Hikage muttered. Although I want nothing more than to tell Toshinori and Shota right now. It won't solve anything in the long run. Not if Izuku gets hurt because of it. Oh, come on! You're all making too much of a big deal out of this! Diagoro huffed, but shut up when Hikage turned to glare at him. Worst case scenario, Hikage said slowly, his cold stare and his stare cold and filled with raw anger that they rarely saw on the normally calm man's face. Izuku might run away like the other people with similar quirks often do. Remember what Hound Dog said? And again, worst case, the kid might even give up One for All before running away, depending on how badly he feels like he needs to hide from everything. I don't ever want to risk that happening, he gritted out. Hikage did not want the kid to distance himself like he himself had done while living. He wanted Izuku to have a family and friends and to actually live. The others all wore similar grim looks on their faces. It was clear no one was happy about this. We'll have to be careful and really think about it before we do anything. But whatever we do, it will all be for Izuku, Nana said softly. A chorus of agreements rang out through the void. Yoichi cleared his throat, effectively gaining everyone's attention. He then stood up, and, out of the shadows of the void, he conjured a whiteboard. All right, so speaking of something more fun, he said with a small smile on his face, while he hung the whiteboard in the air and conjured a pen. Does anyone want to change their bets? Majority is still on Shota finding out first, but anyone want to move forward on the date so change anything else? That got the other Vestiges to perk up, and a few of them started snickering. Oh yeah, definitely. Money is still obviously on Shota, but move it forward. Same. Actually, absolutely keeping my money on Shota. It would take a miracle for Toshi to figure this shit out before him. Nana, that's your successor you are insulting. Yeah, and he's an oblivious idiot. That doesn't mean I don't love him for it. Toshinori's point of view. Toshinori had been having a discussion with the Nezu about upcoming sports festival when there had been a knock on the door and Shota walked inside. Ah, Aizawa! What can I do for you? Nezu cheerfully said, gesturing for Shota to come inside and sit down. I'm gonna need to take the next week off, Shota grumbled, his voice sounding tired and defeated. Toshinori felt his jaw drop, and he stared at his husband, wondering if he had heard that correctly. He glanced over at Nezu and found that even he looked surprised. Nezu quickly smoothed his expression, though, and went back to smiling at Shota. Oh? I seem to recall you telling me you wouldn't be taking any time off, not even an hour ago. What happened? The mammal asked calmly. Instead of answering, Shota just slumped down on the couch and leaned heavily against Toshinori, who immediately laid an arm around his partner's shoulders. Your personal student happened, he muttered, voice sounding exhausted. Young Midoriya? Toshinori asked. What did he do? The words, this time, was left unsaid. He got possessed. What? Toshinori chuckled. He once again wondered if he had heard that correctly. He wasn't even 40 yet. It's way too early for him to have trouble with his hearing. I'm afraid you're going to need to give us a little bit more details than that, Nezu hummed, watching them with curious eyes. I don't know what else to call it, Shota muttered. The vestiges suddenly took over his body and used him like a damn puppet. It didn't seem like any of them were aware that they could do that. Toshinori felt his breath hitch, and he tightened his grip around Shota's shoulders unconsciously. You spoke with the Nana? With the past users? If by spoke with you mean getting chewed out by, then yes, I spoke with them. None of them seemed very happy with me, though. Called me a bad example for the students and a hypocrite before sending me here. The man grumbled, sounding really upset about this. And Toshinori couldn't help but let out a soft laugh. I mean, they do have a point, he chuckled. I know, and that's what makes me so mad. Shota muttered, slinking down even further and causing Toshinori to have to hold back another laugh. Interesting, Nezu said, hummed, gaining their attention. And what about Midoriya? How is he doing? He asked, causing Toshinori to tense. I sent the kid to Recovery Girl to rest. It seemed like whatever that was, it really drained his energy. That made Toshinori relax again. It wasn't good that he had gotten so tired, but at least the kid seemed to listen to the same advice they told Shota. I see. We will probably need to study this further, the principal said, a thoughtful smile on his face. But how fascinating for them to be able to take control like that. Toshinori could sense the disapproving stare from his partner, and he cleared his throat, not wanting a repeat of what happened a few months back. So far, it seemed like Nezu had kept his promise on going easy on, not traumatizing, young Midoriya, and Toshinori would like to keep it that way. Nezu looked up and waved a paw at them. Oh, not to worry. I'm simply intrigued by the possibility of speaking to these past users directly. Although I can't see or hear them, they sometimes join our little lessons with some interesting insight, and I must say that I'd be delighted to meet them one day. That being said, Yagi? Nezu said, turning to Toshinori and causing him to sit straighter. Will you continue training Midoriya, even with Aizawa being absent? Toshinori glanced over at his husband, who sighed and gave a nod. I believe you two should be able to handle it on your own for a while, as long as Recovery Girl is here and available. But, Shota continued sternly, one single injury, and you stop training the quirk until I'm back. I don't want the kid breaking a single bone while I'm gone. If he does, you focus on non-quirk training from then on. Understood? That seems fair, Toshinori agreed with a sigh. Although he'd like to keep training One for All, he agreed that it really wouldn't benefit their student if he kept getting injured. Wonderful! I will make sure to talk with Midoriya about the recent development of his quirk, too. And don't worry about your class, Aizawa. I will have someone taking over all your lessons. You just focus on getting better. Yes, sir, Aizawa muttered. Toshinori could literally hear the pout in his voice. He found himself wondering just what the Vestiges could have said to him to make him agree to rest. And he also felt himself selfishly wondering, would he be able to speak with his mentor again? Izuku's point of view. By the time Izuku woke up, he had missed all of his first two lessons, and it was already lunch. He still felt drained and exhausted, and his skin felt all tight and itchy, like when he went over his time limit and was about to change form. He'd probably have to change earlier this evening, if he could even last that long. Maybe he could take a break here at school? After he left Recovery Girl's office, and after repeatedly promising her that he was fine, the Vestiges immediately apologized profusely for taking over like that. But Izuku just shook his head and reassured them that it was fine. After all, they hadn't even been aware that they could do that. But now that they could, he suddenly felt worried. Would they just start to take over whenever they felt like it? And if they do, then what would stop them from doing whatever they wanted? He shuddered as he remembered how powerless he had felt while being outside of his own body. Izuku immediately moved his hands up to his arms and rubbed at them, something Hound Dog had shown him to help for when he no longer could feel his limbs. And it did help a little, but it didn't stop his worry. Izuku didn't think he'd be able to eat like this, and his skin felt so tight. He realized that he really couldn't stay like this for much longer. With hurried steps, Izuku turned around and headed to the only place he could think of at the moment, ignoring the Vestiges' confused voices as he knocked on the familiar door. He only let himself relax once he heard the cheerful, "Come in!" from the other side, and he stepped inside the room, closing the door behind him. Hey, Nezu-sensei, I'm sorry, but could I stay here for a while? Just, until lunch is over? He asked carefully, shifting a bit in place. Of course you can, Nezu answered kindly, making Izuku's shoulders slump in relief. You're always welcome here. Do you want some tea? His teacher asked, already reaching for the pot. No, thank you. Just need to rest for a while, Izuku answered sheepishly, earning an understanding look from Nezu. All right, I'll make sure to let you know when classes are about to start. Izuku shot a thankful nod at the mammal before he took off his shoes and, with a puff of smoke, he let himself transform. Immediately, the ache in his body disappeared, and he let out a relieved huff of air as he felt himself settle into his new form. Broccoli stretched before he headed over to the window. He considered the carpeted floor for a while, feeling around with his paws before he found a good spot, and he laid down in the warmth of the sun. Nezu didn't seem to mind and simply kept working, the clicking of his computer lulling him into an easy sleep. Broccoli woke up by someone poking him, and he groggily blinked his eyes open to see Nezu sitting next to him. Apologies, but your classes are about to start. If you don't feel well and still need more rest, then I understand, the mammal told him gently, slowly petting his head. He sighed through his nose and moved to stand up, stretching his tired body. As much as he'd like to lay here the whole day, he'd still rather not miss any classes. Izuku transformed back and told Nezu as much, earning a chuckle and another pat on the head from the mammal. All right then. I will be looking forward to our next lesson, especially considering the recent development of your quirk, Nezu said, moving back to his desk. At first, Izuku's tired mind didn't quite understand what he meant. But then he remembered, and he sucked in a sharp breath, stopping in his tracks towards the door. Oh, he said sheepishly, turning back to glance at Nezu. I take it Aizawa told you? That he did, and I look forward to speaking to all of you one day. But until then... Nezu paused, taking a slow sip of his tea before looking up and staring straight at Izuku. But he got the feeling that he wasn't looking at Izuku. I trust you not to abuse this new power, especially considering the strain it seems to put on your body, Nezu told them, calmly. His voice was almost cold and threatening. Inside his mind, Izuku felt the Vestiges shudder, and he couldn't help but laugh a little at the feeling of these already dead heroes recoiling in fear from his teacher. I believe they got the message, Nezu-sensei, Izuku chuckled, a grin on his face as he stepped into his shoes and prepared to leave. The grin he got in return was wide and had the Vestiges tense even more. Good! I'm looking forward to our meeting! Izuku managed to make it to class in time, and only once he sat down did he remember which class they were about to have. If he had remembered before, he might not have been so keen on getting here. As it was now, he realized his mistake was too late, and could only groan internally when Midnight stepped in. To make it even worse, Midnight told them that, until Aizawa-sensei got back, she would step in as the substitute homeroom teacher of Class 1A. Throughout the lesson, Izuku shifted a bit uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding looking at his teacher. He probably looked like your average awkward teenager in front of the R-rated hero. But there was an actual reason he had a hard time with the Midnight. You okay, kiddo? Nana asked gently, appearing next to him and leaning against his desk. There were still some uncomfortable feelings flowing through from the Vestiges. It seemed Nezu really gave them quite a scare. It made him happy that he had yet to experience getting on the mammal's bad side. Izuku frowned and scribbled in his notes. Yeah, just bad memories, he answered in writing, biting his lip as he felt the Vestiges grow confused inside his mind. About Midnight? Nana asked in surprise, and he gave a small nod. Why? He bit his lip, wondering if he should say anything or not. But then Izuku sighed and wrote, Remember Shoto's birthday 3 years ago? When Nemuri brought some catnip to Slushy and Broccoli? There was suddenly loud laughter echoing in Izuku's mind, and he blushed, ducking his head. He already regretted telling them. Oh man, you mean that time you and Slushy raced through the apartment and almost broke the TV? How could we forget? Shoto was furious. It was so funny. Izuku pouted and hunched his shoulders. Easy for you to say. You aren't the ones who had to stay in the timeout box the rest of the evening, he wrote, pouting. But to his dismay, that only caused them to laugh even more, and he suppressed the urge to groan. Anyway, I'm not exactly a big fan of Namuri or Hizashi after that. Wait, you don't like Hizashi? Why? Nana asked, sounding genuinely confused. There was a sour expression on Izuku's face, and he wrote down a single word. Loud. As soon as they saw what he wrote, the Vestiges laughed even louder than before. Izuku felt himself having to fight back a smile, because, despite everything, despite them laughing at him or teasing him almost all the time, they were his friends. And it was nice hearing them laugh so freely, especially now that he had gotten just a small glimpse of the lonely hell they must have spent decades in. So, yeah, Izuku could probably take the teasing, if it meant he got to hear them laugh like this more often. Author's notes. Welp, so the Vestiges can possess Izuku now. But hopefully they will listen to Nezu and only use this new power respectfully. I apologize for the lack of broccoli in this broccoli story. There will be more of our little cat boy after the sports festival. Right now, it's more focused on Izuku getting through school. And because I still feel weird in the head, I can't promise a new chapter soon. But this story will be finished. That I can promise. Thank you again, everyone, for all the lovely comments and support. They really mean a lot. Hope you all have a wonderful day or night, wherever you are in the world. And that's a wrap on Chapter 18. And I just wanted to remind everyone again, Chapter 17 was an author's note. There was no story material in it. It was the author talking about taking a break, which has passed now because there's a lot more of the story to still read. But I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Please go show the author, Texiliaz, some love. Because, like, wow, this writing, it's so good. It's so good. It's so professional, right? I Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please leave me a comment. They make me so happy to read your comments. So happy. Um, and with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye, pups!